I wanted to talk to you about what the Fed just said. Now, this is going to be good for the stock market, I believe. We had the markets react pretty positively to the news and to Jerome Powell speaking. We can actually see here right at 2 p.m. Eastern time, the market jumped and then it continued to move up throughout the speech. Now it moved down a little bit towards the end, but you can see the Nasdaq's doing quite well, the S&P 500, the Dow's even moved up a little bit. But we also have the dollar index falling down. I'll explain that a little bit, and crypto's coming up based on what the Fed said. So if you guys don't mind just hitting the like button, I really appreciate that. It helps out the channel a lot. Also, if you guys want, there is a link down there to BlockFi and to Voyager. I think you should have multiple cryptocurrency brokers if you invest in cryptocurrency. Both of them pay interest, and you can sign up with both of them underneath the video to get a bonus. If you guys aren't interested in that, there's also a link down there to Webull, so I do appreciate that. Now, the indexes came up on the news of what the Fed said. Also, what's interesting is the dollar index, which if you don't know what that is, you can see here, the dollar index is an index of the value of the United States dollar relative to a basket of foreign currencies. So basically, as the US dollar index goes down, it's not great for the US dollar, but it kind of makes sense after what we saw today that it did that because we did see it drop off around 2 p.m. Now, the reason for that is that the Fed talked about continuing their near zero interest rates, which means inflation probably will continue at a very high rate. Also, they are continuing their repurchasing, which is great for the stock market, but it's not great for the US dollar because that means inflation is going to continue. So they said they are going to hold their benchmark interest rates near zero as the economy continues to progress despite concerns over the pandemic spread. The Federal Open Market Committee concluded its two-day meeting by keeping interest rates near targets. Along with that, the committee reiterated its view that the economy continues to strengthen. So we'll talk about that here more in a minute, discussing what Jerome Powell actually said. But in addition to the US dollar falling down and the indexes moving up, we also had crypto move up. So right as Jerome Powell started talking and as the Fed gave their statement, we had Bitcoin go up from about 39.5 all the way up to 40.5. Now that may or may not be because of the Fed, but it kind of makes sense, right? If we're going to stay in this high inflation environment, that Bitcoin would go up because a lot of people think of it as an inflation hedge. Now let's talk about what he actually discussed. So I have my notes here. So unemployment is still high among African Americans. Inflation is transitory. That's how they started out. If there are signs that inflation were going to continue, they would change the policy. This is what they've said for a while, and Jerome kind of kept up with exactly what they've said, which is good for the stock market because people feel a little bit of safety there. Now, low interest rates until inflation is at 2% and employment goes down. That's what they're saying. As long as unemployment is high among certain groups and that continues, we're going to stay in a low interest rate environment. They really want to see these lower numbers before they continue and start raising interest rates. They will give advance warning before changing policy either on bond repurchases or on raising interest rates. They really focus more on bond purchases. Hey, we'll give advance warning, and that's what they've said before this. Now they broke into the question and answer section. So the first section, just Jerome Powell speaking, and it was very similar to what he said before. And then we had a bunch of different questions. We'll just go through some of them here. Can you give numbers behind substantial further progress? And Jerome said, okay, max unemployment. There's no single number, right? We want low unemployment. But there's no single number that we can look at to determine that because it's going to be based on a broad range of categories and data. Now, they want strong job numbers. That's really going to be what pushes them towards substantial further progress. It's going to depend on every single group, though, because if one group is still left out, they're probably going to still consider that not substantial further progress. Now, they said, have you reached the inflation side, right? We have the unemployment side, but inflation is high. Are you going to raise rates or would you raise rates because of inflation? He said, there's obviously clear inflation. It's above 2%. It's higher than they thought, but they still think it will fall back down. They still think it's transitory. So someone asked, is this the advanced notice, the advanced further substantial progress? And how do you feel about the Delta variant? So he said, really, there's less economic implications after each wave. Someone asked him about this later, and he said, hey, at first we had to shut down. We saw massive shutdowns that really impeded economic activity, but now we're not seeing that. Now we're seeing a lot less economic impact from the Delta variant, from the cases increasing. So they're not as worried about the Delta as they were the original. Now, they said, okay, are we still a ways away from liftoff and raising interest rates? He said, yes, we're still considering it, but really that's still a far ways off. Someone said, what do you think about risk of inflation? He said, the last inflation report came in high, but really they're focused on specific areas. Like they look at all the categories of inflation, and they said, hey, there was significant inflation in cars, but they think supply will ratchet up. They think that will take over and it will equalize at some point. So they see short-term inflation being quite high, but they think medium-term and long-term it will decrease. We will have a period of high inflation, but that should fall. That's what they said. Now, someone asked, would you raise interest rates if not at high employment? Like, even if we were still at high unemployment, would you raise them if inflation is too high? And or if we're still repurchasing, right? If we haven't started decreasing the amount of repurchasing, would you still raise interest rates? He said they usually go hand in hand, inflation and unemployment, but right now they're not, right? So usually if there's high employment, there's high inflation, but he said that he doesn't imagine that will probably happen. Now, someone asked, okay, there's 10 million unemployed people, there are 10 million job openings. Why is that? Why aren't we able to mesh these together and have low unemployment? He gave really 5 or 4 different reasons for this. He said, first of all, some people are just taking a while to find new jobs. They're not looking for the same jobs they had. They're looking for new areas of work, and that makes sense. I mean, a lot of people have had time to reflect and realize, hey, maybe I didn't like that job that I was working at for so many years. Also, they may be reluctant to go back because of COVID. So they might not want to go back to their job where they're exposed, or maybe they have someone in their home that's immunodeficient. Maybe they don't want to go back to those same jobs if they're on the front lines. Also, schools are not fully reopened yet. A lot of people are still at home with their kids. That makes sense, right? I mean, we're still in summer. Also, unemployment benefits. He said that a lot of these will dwindle down, a lot of these issues, and we should have strong unemployment, or strong employment, I should say, in the future. Someone asked for him to elaborate on the economic implications of each new wave, and he said, again, less shutdowns after the second wave, vaccines, and vaccine rates are high, and people have learned to live with it. Companies and people, just citizens, have learned to live with the virus being around. He said, for example, some things have changed, whether it's people getting takeout from restaurants or home buying. He specifically said home buying has moved more virtual. That's great for companies like Zillow and Redfin, even companies like Matterport. I'm invested in Matterport, GHVI right now, and that's great for them because they really focus on online home purchasing. So the last question I want to cover, when do you think we will see inflation without pandemic related changes, I should say? So when do you think we will see, or when do you think we'll know that this is just inflation? It's not due to the pandemic. And he said, if we start to see categories level out, then we will see what we expected. So even though it's transitory just means short term. It doesn't necessarily mean that something that increased in price will come back down. It just means, hey, it could increase 20% this year, and then it will just level out and go pretty much sideways for a while. Then it will show that it really was transitory and that it was due to the pandemic, for example, supply problems, or even just demand picking up. He said it will take some time, but he doesn't want to put an exact number on it. He said, and he reiterated this a couple times, supply shock is what's causing inflation right now. So overall, I think that's a very strong statement from the Fed. Great to see. I mean, it's definitely causing the markets to be positive right now. Just reiterating the fact that they're keeping their interest rates low and continuously repurchasing bonds. So that is good to see. It's pretty much what we wanted to see. Now, he didn't come out and say, hey, we're going to keep inflation, or we're going to continue to keep rates low no matter what inflation is. He did not say that. He said that it's a fluid thing that they are continuously looking at. So anything can change at any point in the future. He didn't want to put numbers on when we were going to start raising interest rates, which is good. So overall, I'd say this was a pretty positive Fed statement and just a Fed meeting. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe to the channel. Definitely hit that like button too if you guys don't mind. If you guys want, you can check out the links down below to BlockFi and to Webull and Voyager. Those are great platforms I use for investing. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.